welcome for those of you who don't speak Afrikaans. 欢迎大家. I want to take this occasion to welcome all of you to the China Roundtable of the 2010 Global Forum. This is a very exciting occasion for us. 女士们、先生们，欢迎各位来参加今天的全球论坛的中国原作。I'd also like to extend a special welcome to members of the local and international media who are with us today, including more than 20 from China's broadcast, online, and print media sector. Very glad to have you with us. I'm Tom Gorman, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Fortune China. We have a distinguished panel of experts this morning to address the theme of today's roundtable, which is China 2020. The extraordinary story of China's phenomenal growth and development. Now, as we all know, the China story is punctuated by staggering and phenomenal statistics. One example of that is that last year there were 37 Chinese companies on the Fortune Global 500 list, as opposed to only 8 10 years before that. Not only that, but those 37 companies represented some 7% of the total revenues of the Global 500 last year, versus 1% 10 years earlier. In addition, Beijing surpassed New York and London and ranked only behind Paris and Tokyo as the headquarters city for Global 500 companies. With 2009 growth of 8.7% in China and the situation in the rest of the world and the strong performance, particularly of China's state-owned enterprises, I think it would be no surprise to me if Chinese companies in this year's Global 500 list hit or even surpassed 50 in number. The blistering growth rate of China has obviously catapulted China into unprecedented prominence in the minds of global business and political leaders. It's also raised a whole host of questions about the directions of China's development, and that's what we're here to talk about today in a conversation with our distinguished panelists and all of you. So I'm about to introduce our panel's moderator, but before that, as an item of housekeeping, for those of you who haven't figured it out, your electronic device on your table. Channel 1 is the English translation channel. Channel 2 is the Mandarin translation channel. Just press the cord at your table into that, and you'll be up and away. So without further ado, let me please join me in welcoming our panel moderator today, Mr. C.J. Liu, who is the founder and chairman of Pan-Pacific Management and also the head of this year's China delegation to the Global Forum. C.J.?
Yeah. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our CEO panels. We have 7 CEOs here, and six of them are directly from China, and one, the global CEO, has a lot of experience with China business. So first of all, I would like to call on Mr. David Brennan, the CEO of AstraZeneca. Please, David, welcome. And
thanks.
Here.
Thank you.
And the next one will be Mr. Chen Dongsheng, Chairman and CEO of Taikang Life Insurance from China. Mr. Chen, please. So our honored guest of the next one is Mr. Wang Jianzhou, Chairman and CEO of China Mobile Group. Mr. Wang, please. And the next one is Mr. Bill Power, the China Bureau Chief and Asia Editor, Fortune Magazine. Bill. Our next CEO is Mr. Xu Jianguo, Chairman and CEO of Shanghai Electric Group. Mr. Xu, please. Our next guest is Mr. He Huajiang, the Chairman of Chengdu Association for Culture Exchange, Mr. He. And for your information, Chengdu is the central city of Sichuan province. So Mr. He represents the Midwest part of China. And our last CEO representative is Mr. Zheng Fang from Keywise Capital Management. Mr. Zheng, please. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I have several figures to share with you. Back to 1949, the so-called the People's Republic of China was founded. That year, the GDP was US dollars 439. What that mean? That means that number actually was lower than 100 years ago, back to 1890. So it took China like 35 years until 1980, the GDP went up to $960. And how much the GDP is today? I guess a lot of guests know it's about 6,000 US dollars. So it's like you can calculate, it's 100 times growth. If you look at the data closely, particularly in the past 10 years, that growth is more dramatic than the previous 20 or 30 years. So my first question will be started with Mr. Wang, Chairman Wang from China Mobile, and let him to share with us from his own experience with China Mobile. What's the key success factors or reasons China Mobile or companies like China Mobile in China has grown so fast and so wonderfully? Mr. Wang.
Thank you. China Mobile is a company for mobile communication operation, and China Mobile is developing with the growth of the national economy. And in 1876, American Alexander Bell invented telephony. And in 1882, the first telephone office was set up in Shanghai by a Danish company. It was 1882. But 100 years later, in 1982, the total telephone subscribers in China, in mainland China, were only 3 million after 100 years. But now, today, China Mobile, we get 5 new subscribers every month currently. And China Mobile Corporation, China Mobile Communication Corporation was founded 10 years ago. And it was a very small company then. But today, we now have 550 million subscriber base. And and we now still get 5 million per month into our subscriber base as addition. And we also the number 99 for Fortune Global 500, and we raised every year. And I think the reason is very simple. The first, it is because the growth of the Chinese economy. And the growth of the economy give us a very big demand for that, not only in urban area, but also in rural areas. So this is the most important thing. And second thing, we catch the opportunity and use our wisdom and our force and to realize the growth of telecommunication in China.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wang. And also, a similar question I want to ask Mr. Chen Dongsheng. Actually, Mr. Chen has a very special background. Today on this panel, he represented all the financial industry in China, but also we call the 股份制. It's a shareholding or more like a privatized company. One of the largest insurance company in China. So as far as I know, Mr. Chen and his friends founded the first insurance company in China and also founded the first credit rating companies, if I remember correctly. So the same question to Mr. Chen is, In the past 10 years, what's your own experience for the fast growth of your company?
非常高兴今天有机会跟很多朋友来交流中国成长的经验。我昨天还想一个课题了，就是一个国家和企业的关系。你看，美国成为全球最大的市场和经济体后，美国有世界500强企业占110家。当然，中国这20年改革开放30年，特别这10年经济增长最快。所以这10年，刚才我们的高总编也讲到了，中国进入世界500强，从最开始几家，现在到50家。其实随着中国成为世界第2大经济体，未来会有更多的企业也会成长为世界500强。当然，像我这个企业跟王总还有些差异，就是确实是1992年，我当时有一个想法，觉得人寿保险在中国有很伟大的前景，所以在92年我开始想申办一个保险公司。所以我大概用了4年时间，96年才成立了这个保险公司，是我一手开创，拿了些国有企业、一些民营企业来做我的股东。当然，这10年的时间也是中国经济高速成长的一个非常好的一个例证。我记得很清楚，在2000年的时候，我们在中国也有一个企业家论坛叫亚布力，那个时候我们的这个1年的保费收入大概10个亿，2000年。大概今年我1年的保费收入大概要到900个亿，所以你想不到10年的时间，大概增长了就算是16个亿，到现在的话，整整是200倍，20倍还是20倍，所以这样一个高增长，所以也是见证了这个中国经济的一个快速的发展。所以我在10年前的时候刚成立不久的时候，那时候员工也就是有几十个人。现在大概我的员工有就是保险纯代理人 agent 大概有30万人，员工大概有25000个人了。所以我总资产现在大概有2400个亿人民币，所以那个时候总资产大概只有50-60个亿，所以现在总资产也翻了，也是几十倍。客户也是一样。所以我们现在客户当然跟王总是无法比，他的小零头，但是要再说出来也是很庞大。当然我现在2400万客户了，所以就是这样一个，你可以看到也是一个在中国经济高成长过程中，当然也有很多企业失败，但是在这个高成长过程中，有很多行业，有很多企业抓住这个历史的机遇，能够天时地利人和的，而且我们也是注重向国外的企业学习。建立完善的企业法人的这个治理结构，还有一个特别注重这个人才的这样一个激励和培养，还有一个最重要的，我也在总结里面在像哈佛家写我们泰康人寿案例，他在问为什么那么多跨国的外国的保险公司在中国为什么发展的不太好，还有一个为什么在中国有些保险公司也做不过你，我也在想，其实我们最大的经验就是说，作为一个新兴市场。特别新兴市场和发达市场的这个企业的成长的路径是不一样的，绝对不能够用发达市场、成熟市场来去在新兴市场来去建立的企业，一定会，不能说失败，它一定发展不快。新兴市场的办法，我觉得有点像毛泽东当年搞革命打游击，就农村包围城市，占山为王的方法。所以我对泰康人寿成功最大的一个总结就是，抓住每一个发展的历史的机遇，采取超常规、跨越式的跳跃式发展，只有这样才能够发展成功。如果要是今天把泰康人寿作为一个金融企业，你这么高速发展的这样一个案例拿出来，如果要放在西方或者是发达市场的金融界人士来看，他们一定是不理解的，就是你觉得你这么快发展有充满了风险。觉得你这么快发展里面，你很多事情是不能平衡的。所以呢，这是我觉得这是我们最大的经验。我们就在快速发展过程中，能够平衡和管理的关系，平衡资本的关系，还有一个平衡人才需求的关系。这是我们最成功的经验。谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Chen. In a moment, I will ask a similar question from the global perspective. But before that, I still have the same question to another Chinese CEO, Mr. Xu Zong. He's from a very large Chinese, we call it SOE, state-owned company in Shanghai. I would very much like to hear his comments about the success of his company in the past 10 years. And after that, we open up for the global perspective. 徐总先生，
谢谢主持人。这个上海电气呢主要是做生产能源装备和工业装备的一家企业。那么这几年能快速发展呢，这个我想主要是2条吧。一个呢是得益于国家的发展和市场的超常规的这个发展。这个装备呢和刚才王董事长介绍的中移动呢有很多相像的地方。中国呢是1870年呢有第一台发电机在上海。那么经过100年呢，就到1976年是文化大革命结束的时候呢，全中国的装机容量呢只有5000万千瓦。那么到现在为止呢，中国的装机容量可能已经超过8亿千瓦，有人说已经到这个9亿千瓦，也就在改革开放30多年时间里面，增加了那么多倍，而且前几年最高峰的时候，每年呢增加1亿千瓦。对于这样一种市场发展，我上海电气的火力发电装备呢，这个生产能力呢已经达到3000万千瓦。3000万千瓦概念就是说，西门子也好，吉也好，他们在最高年份的时候的生产能力呢是1000万千瓦。所以这样我们就发展会很快。那么第二个，这几年能够快呢，我们觉得上海电气呢是能够比较好的处理对外开放和独立自主的关系。上海电气从80年代开始就引进当时美国西欧的这个发电设备的技术。80年代末呢，这个西欧把发电设备、火力发电设备卖给西门子了，所以90年代我们一直和西门子合作。到现在为止，我们上海电气和全世界很多跨国公司，大概有将近100家，大大小小将近100家合资企业，有一部分是我们控股的，那么有一部分呢是外国公司控股的，比如说像发电设备、三菱电梯，这个都是我们控股的，就我们和西门子合作，电梯是和三菱合作。那么也有一些呢是外国公司控股的，比如说在输配电方面，有这个 ABB 啊，这个是现在是阿尔斯通的，刚刚卖给阿尔斯通控股的。不管是我们控股的还是外国公司控股的，得益于中国市场的发展，这几年发展都很快，所以我们也达到了一个双赢的局面吧。谢谢。
So I would like to ask Mr. Zheng Fang. Mr. Zheng has a lot of experience in investing in China. He used to work for the Wall Street. I think it's building a financial powerhouse in China. So from your experience, do you agree what just the 3 or 4 CEOs said about their reason for success?
I think in the last 30 years, China actually had one of the most successful economic development history in the world. I think it should be attributed to a few factors. I think one factor is China has a larger population, which is underdeveloped. Then that's a lot of rooms for them to develop. And the second thing, which I think is very important, is China adopt reforms. So in the last 30 years, actually, what I can see, most of the success came from continuation of the reforms, not only in the policy, but also in a variety of the areas, including society, including even in the legal system, China actually has improving a lot. And thirdly, China has opened up much more openly, widely than Japan in the last 30 years, allowing foreign capitals going into China and also stimulate innovation and entrepreneurship in China. I give you an example. We have invested in a company which actually they borrowed a brand. They borrowed out a brand from Europe, which some of you may know. It's called a Kappa. The Kappa brand actually was popular, and also a lot of people who are Italian fans love that kind of brand. However, one of the Chinese company, kind of China Dongxiang, they bought the brand exclusively. Within 8 years, the company actually become over $2 billion market cap company, which is basically 10 times bigger than its parent company, originally invented the brand. Why China has that kind of opportunities, why the Chinese teams can manage the business such successfully in China, I think when I looking back at their business model, it's definitely in terms of the designing, distribution, dealership management, everything is localized. It's not, they of course, they take the good things from their parent company, but also they are flexible enough to develop a business model suitable for China. So I agree with Mr. Chen's opinion. I think in the world, there's no business model can handle over 1.3 billion populations. You have to keep open-minded. If you are not open-minded, basically, you cannot build a business model successful in China. So I think open mind is very important for every Fortune 500 company going to China.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Brennan, yes. You just came back from Shanghai 2 weeks ago. So tell us about your experience in China. Is that an easier place to do business? Of course, compared to what? Right? Let's say compared to the United States.
Yeah, no, I think our business in China, if I look back over the last 7 or 8 years, has grown at a much faster rate than our overall business. So I work in the pharmaceutical industry. Our business last year generated over $800 million in revenue, and it's growing at about 37 or 38% a year in a market that's growing at about 15% a year. So our business is outperforming the market growth. And I think, my experience has been over the last several years that we have expanded our entire presence in China. So we've expanded from a company that was some 500 or 600 people just 7 or 8 years ago. We are now over 4,000. We have a manufacturing facility there that is now providing product to Asia, not just to China, and we're actually shipping some product into Europe. About 4 years ago, we set up a research facility there. We have about 100 discovery scientists who work in translational sciences in oncology, so translating kind of the scientific discoveries from a discovery perspective into how to translate them into activity in oncology in man. And we have a significant sales and marketing organization. Now, the point I think you just made about having a broad mind about China is a good one, because our success has really been based mostly on the coast. Okay. It's been in the more developed segments of China, exactly, the East Coast. Yeah. And I think we are now looking to say, how do we get some penetration into the broader market? The government in China, as many of you probably know, has put in an insurance system to provide some basic insurance to the broader market of people. There's been an investment of some $125 billion taking place right now in these couple of years to put new facilities on the ground, hospitals, clinics, outpatient facilities, and there's a significant effort underway to increase the overall quality of healthcare delivery from professionals, from physicians, from nurse practitioners, from people that are in the community delivering the health. So we see that expansion of what is actually a relatively small proportion of the population continuing to grow. And we are also now looking for local opportunities to become part of this broader market segment. We would like to be in a situation where we're serving a few 100 million people in the future. Right now, it's still a relatively small part of the population, but it's the developing middle class. So, so we're continuing to expand. I would just make one other point for those of you that are in business. Our turnover rate amongst our over 4,000 people is about 20% a year. So we actually have to hire 800 plus people a year to stay even. And we're trying. What's the average of industry? Yeah, it's about 30. So 30? We actually perform better than the industry. Okay. But my point was that we're trying to add 400 or 500 people a year. Okay. So we're actually hiring some 1,200 people a year to get some expansion and maintain our business. So, but it's an extremely fast-moving market. It's very exciting. Anytime I'm working in London and I'm really depressed, I go to China and I come back here. So refreshed, feel refreshed. So Bill, you've been in China how many years?
8 in total, and 8 of the last 10, basically.
Yeah, I know you are the voice from Fortune in Asia, actually. I read a lot of your articles. Chinese company going global, China's internet policies, etc. I'm sure a lot of readers like your article. So can you tell me like 2 or 3 things you really believe in the past 10 years, which has driven the Chinese economy growing so fast? Just give me 2 or 3 things.
Well, I think CJ, I think the thing that I've been most impressed by and is a key point about China's economic policymakers is that they are smart goes without saying. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. They're smart, but they're also pragmatic. I mean, I like the phrase open-minded. Deng Xiaoping was not in any way an ideologue, even though he was a communist, a member of the Communist Party in good standing. And I think the economic policymakers in China are all his children, which is to say they confront problems, they confront them directly, and they negotiate the conditions that are in front of them both immediately and also down the road. Let me give you an example from recent history. The onset of the financial crisis in the West, in the US and then in Europe, frankly took many of the folks in Beijing by surprise, caught them by surprise. And China felt very vulnerable and very threatened by the fallout from what was going to be the imminent collapse and turned out to be the imminent, although let's hope short-term, collapse of key export markets, the United States being first and foremost. Without regard to theoretical economic policy debates, the Chinese government put the pedal to the metal, spent money which went from a budgetary surplus situation to a small deficit in 2009, but spent money on infrastructure, sopped up a lot of unemployment that came from the coastal regions because small and medium-sized factories, particularly in low-end businesses, had closed, and managed to react and to diffuse the economic fallout from the West's collapse to a degree that was remarkable. And I'll be the first to admit, I did not expect it. We did an international cover in Fortune, which I wrote. I'll take the blame for it. Is China falling? The story said. I mean, because all the indicators seem to be that the seismic shocks of the financial crisis were definitely going to hit China, and the government responded with policies that were much more effective than I think those conventional analysts, economists, and journalists like myself expected. I think similarly now we're seeing that pragmatism appear again, both in the recent announcement on the renminbi revaluation, or at least allowing it to be more flexible against the dollar and international currencies, and also in dealing with what clearly was and is an overheated property market. The government is taking steps, again, to try to rein that in a bit because they know it's a risk. So I think the key takeaway from this, the key message, is that the Chinese government is very smart and is open-minded. They will attack problems and not try to kick them down the road when it comes to economic policy. And I have to say I've been very, even though at times skeptical, my skepticism has been misplaced, basically.
Okay. Thank you for your candid remark. Well, I want to look at the future trend about China. But before we go there, I want to share a little story with our audience. in the back to if you look at the past 5 years, there's something funny happening in China. We have to look at the challenges today. If you are a lawyer, or if you are so-called white-collar people working for, let's say, Motorola or P&G in China, you're supposed to make good income, or for your company, for the pharmaceutical company. But if you work like for 5 years or 10 years in the past 5 or 10 years, you look back at your savings, suddenly you feel very ashamed. Why is that? Because you found out that your wife happened to buy a house 5 years ago. So now today, that price of the house appreciated so much. For most of the cases, on average basis, I would say, it's really bigger now, the income growth, than your salary or than your savings. Yeah. So a lot of Chinese people feel it's really unfair. Why the housing price is going so fast instead of the hard working. So I would say it's really like hard working doesn't pay today. So that's one of the challenges. I think Bill Tran mentioned the real estate policies and the situation. Hopefully the government is smart enough to really can solve that problem. So I look down the road the next 10 years, actually we have a lot of challenges. For example, Mr. Chairman Wang's company, China Mobile, I'll give you an example. In Beijing market or Shanghai, the penetration rate is already over 100%. I believe in Beijing it's 120 or 130%. Right. You can imagine, one person had carried 2 phones. So I will come back to Chairman Wang, where's the continued growth for China Mobile if everyone have 2 phones, fine, So, but first of all, I want to give you another data before I go back to Mr. Wang. I want to ask Mr. He. He's from Sichuan province, because my data show last year, the GDP growth in his province is around 15%, the GDP growth. But the whole country, nationally average, only 8 or 9%. So obviously, a lot of people guessing in the next 5 or 10 years, the western part of China should be the growth area. I mean, you talk about not just the East Coast for your consumers. So, Mr. He, I would like to listen to your comments on the future growth for China.
大家好，我是来自中国西部城市成都的何华章。可能刚才都在谈到中国经济的增长，现在正被全世界关注。可能大家也注意到，在中国经济的增长当中，其实中国西部的经济增长又是中国这个经济增长最快的。按照2009年中国 GDP 的统计，在中国2009年的 GDP 增长当中，我们的东部增长率是达到了10.8%，我们的中部增长率达到了11.7%，我们的东北增长率达到12.6%，而我们的西部呢，去年的增长达到了13.5%，这个数字是中国最高的，而且是在其他地方2009年比起2008年都有所回落的情况下，这个中国西部的增长，2009比2008呢，却还增长了1个百分点。我觉得呢，这个现象不奇怪，这个是因为这个我们的西部，我们有非常好的资源，而且有良好的生态保护，这个也有后发的优势，所以正是因为这3个方面的主要原因呢，我觉得使得中国西部的经济增长不仅是去年，不仅是今天，因为今天讨论的话题是未来的10年，就是在未来的10年当中，这个中国西部的经济增长都会是最快的。我呢来自成都，所以我也特别要给大家介绍，在中国西部经济增长当中，成都又是特别值得关注，因为成都是中国西部的门户城市，这个是中国国务院确定的科技中心、这个贸易和物流中心、金融中心以及交通和通信的枢纽，所以简单说，成都是中国未来经济增长最快的区域里边最重要的一个城市。我就举一下这个交通枢纽方面的例子。实际上成都可能一般人来讲，它处于中国的内地，可能交通不是很发达。而实际上呢，成都在中国的中西部里边，我们是一个非常重要的一个交通枢纽。那我们有全亚洲最大的集装箱中心站。这个成都的航空枢纽，这个是中国中西部 最大的一个航空枢纽，当然其实也是中国内陆里边这个最大的航空枢纽。我们的这个不论是客运量还是货运量，这个都是西部最大的。在中国的机场里边，除了北京机场、上海机场、广州机场，我们和深圳机场差不多，基本上是中国第4大的这个机场枢纽的城市。另外呢，我们成都也还是这个中国西部啊开放度最高的城市。在中国西部城市的开放度总体来讲，这几年都在高速的这个增长，但成都呢又是开放度最高的。我们有包括美国、德国、法国等9个国家在成都都有这个领事机构。另外，因为今天我们台上也做了很多很强的企业了，500强企业，我们成都有141家这个世界500强企业，这个在成都有业务，也包括特别是像类似英特尔这样的公司，从2004年以来，这个已经是第3次增资，在成都第3次增资。现在这个英特尔最大的全球封装测试就在我们成都，可以说全球每2台电脑里边就有1台电脑的封装测试是从成都出去的。这是这个枢纽方面，这个所以说呢，成都实际上，不论是学者也好，这个还是产业界也好，大家都非常的看重成都。这个有一个著名的经济学家蒙代尔，他对中国的西部大开发这个有过比较深入的研究。他在他的这个专题的报告里边，他对成都有这么一个评价，就是说成都是中国西部大开发的引擎城市，成都还是中国内陆投资环境的标杆城市，这个成都还是中国新型城市化道路的一个重要的引领城市。有些文化人这个对成都有个概括，叫做典型中国西部之星。当然，这个典型中国呢，它主要还是这个针对成都丰厚的、悠久的这个历史文化和自然生态而言。所谓西部之星呢，其实主要还是针对成都的这个经济方面的影响力而言的。这个中国有个著名导演张艺谋，他就说过，成都是一个来了就不想离开的城市，等等吧。所以我想呢，借这个机会，告诉大家，这个未来中国的经济增长，应该首要的，我觉得是看西部，在西部呢，成都非常非常的重要。好，我就介绍这些。
谢谢社长，谢谢。So, if the west part of China looks like have more more brighter future in China growth, my question is going to be Chairman Wang. For the high penetration rate, is that the western part of China is your target, strategic target, or you have something else in your mind to continue to grow China Mobile?
Yes. Although we achieve the big growth in past 10 years, and we still think we have a large room for the further development in telecommunications. And first, we still focus on the new subscribers acquisition. Even in larger cities like Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, the penetration rate of mobile phone now is as high as 120%, even more. But in rural areas, the penetration rate is still very low. And in China, 700 million people now live in rural areas. And so we think rural area will still have very big potential for mobile phone development. And there are still the digital divide between the urban area and rural areas. When the high penetration in cities, there is a big shortage of cell phones and PCs in rural areas. 5 years ago, when we started to develop the rural area, many analysts of investment bank warned us never do business in rural area, especially in the remote area. It will hurt investors, and but we didn't believe that. First thing, we as a company, as a corporate citizen, we have the social responsibility. We should do that to bridge the digital divide. That's the first thing. And second, if we finish the coverage in rural area, we can attract many rural customers. It will make a contribution even for our profits. And now it's become true. And today, even still the loss in remote areas, but generally in rural area, it is profitable for mobile phone business. And today, about 60% of new subscribers of China Mobile now from rural area. So now it convinces all investors and analysts. And the second area we are focused is for the data and information. You know, mobile phone will not be only the telephone. It will be a device which can do anything. And we think to use mobile phone to download the music. We know last year we have the revenue from the music worth about 20 billion RMB yuan. It is much larger than that of the music CD revenue, plus the total revenue of movies industry in China. And it still has very large room for the further growth.
So far, no one knows actually China Mobile is the largest music record company.
That's true. And, you know, even for mobile banking, mobile payment, you know, early this year, we acquired 20% of shares of Shanghai Commercial Bank. We will do the mobile banking based on the combination of bank and telecommunications. So we think both in rural area and both in in the area of data and information, we still has very large room for the further growth.
Okay, so China One is very ambitious. You know, now it's already the largest music company, not just the communication. He also wants to be the largest bank.
No.
So I would like Mr. Chen, do you see the rural growth as well in the insurance business in China? 农村市场。
刚刚王董事长讲，我情不自禁，我一定要接着他说了，因为大家知道美国梦是我们中国人很羡慕的，中国人现在也在编自己的故事，说中国人也有一个中国梦。中国梦是什么呢？我自己有我的一个解读，就像中国城市里的人过上中产阶级的生活，让农村的人呢过上城里人的生活。所以王董事长是5年前到农村市场，我到3年前也开始进军农村市场。所以我说，城里人呢，我们讲生活方式叫买车、买房、买保险，叫新3大件。中国人讲新3大件，所以所谓新3大件就标志你的成功的。过去在毛泽东时代就是手表、自行车、缝纫机，在邓小平时代是叫彩电、冰箱、洗衣机。到了现在呢是买车、买房、买保险。但农村的人呢也有一个新3大件。农村是哪新3大件呢？骑着摩托车，打着这个王董事长的这个移动通讯的手机，手里拿了一个泰康人寿的保单。我讲叫农民的新3大件。我是体会很深。我们大概3年前，这3年的时间在农村建了2600个网点，销售网点。所以我们在村里还有泰康人寿的叫驻村的保险代表。中国的这个乡镇发生非常大的变化，就很多新兴的乡镇在崛起。过去呢，在传统经济时候，乡村里的基本是农业机械站，什么这个卫生防御站，还有一个就是所谓的畜牧站。那个时候是那个农村新农村的象征。今天你去看新农村，最亮眼的就是中国移动的这个卖手机的门店，旁边呢是泰康人寿一张保单保全家的保险的门店，真的是的，我的您下去可能去看过了。所以现在就是这种通讯的生活方式、保险保障的生活方式已经渗透到农村了。当然呢，今天的我们题目是看。未来2020年，未来10年中国的经济， 我也今天想跟朋友们分享，就是说，中国经济你看今天高成长，取得很大成就，但中国经济里面也有巨大的问题，比方说贫富差距的问题、公共产品不好的问题、这个社会这个公正的问题、这个社会保障制度这个不健全的问题、收入分配体系改革不到位的问题。但是我认为都是中国发展中的这样一个问题。我认为未来中国10年最深刻，大家如果你们要在中国做生意，一定要了解中国未来10年这个社会发生剧烈、最重大变化的，甚至革命性变化的，就是城乡一体化，也就是在中国，再用10年时间，基本实现现代化。基本实现现代化最大的一个本质，就是城市和农村的差别要基本消灭。所以城乡一体化。新兴城镇的崛起，农民成为一个新城镇的这样一个城市人口的公民。未来10年，这是中国经济结构最重大的变化的一个方面。所以，谁抢占到农村的市场，谁抢占到中国新兴城镇的市场，谁就是未来的赢家。所以我跟着王董事长，我相信他已经是大赢家，我也是次赢家。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Mr. Chen. I would like to open up to our audience, but first of all, I would like to call on Dr. Sobe from South Africa on table 5. Where are you, Dr.? Yeah. Please, I have a question. Based on your observation of the development of South Africa, what do you see the challenges for China? The development for the next 10 years. Can you share with us?
Yes, thank you. If I can just say, I think a conversation that we started in Davos 3 years ago and continued again in Tianjin and Dalian. I was speaking to Mr. Wang of China Mobile about this earlier. I think from 2 areas. One is to see how China, the challenge we have in Africa, for instance, is managing growth with social inequality and that tension that arises in that situation. And I guess one wants to know how is China going to manage that particular growth and tension, because as you said, the cost of living is increasing at the same time as there's a greater middle class and people are coming to the economy. And I think a second area for us as Africans is that we are seeing quite a lot of investment by China on the continent, and in particular in the area of commodities. But in our experience, and this is the conversation that we started in multiple forums, is with the exception of perhaps 3 companies from the continent, we are having great difficulty in accessing the Chinese markets from a regulatory level, a partnership level, investment level for the major African corporations. We do have 1 or 2 or 3 successes from the continent. What advice do you have for African companies to invest into China, to partner in China, to balance out the trade a bit more at the same time? I guess maybe just to conclude is that just recently we signed about 20 commercial trade agreements with Chinese companies. This was about 6 months ago in the presence of one of the key ministers that visited us. We are now going to China on a state visit in the next month or so. We have not made much progress in those commercial trade agreements directly between companies from China and ourselves, including some of the investments that we've signed with Chinese companies, partly due to the regulatory issues in China itself. So we, I think, as African companies are feeling perhaps frustrated that we are not being able to access the Chinese market as easily as, I dare say, European and North American counterparts. And I'm not sure why, why we're having that difficulty, and perhaps the panel can shed some light on that for us.
David, maybe you can help him. He has a question. You heard. You have a
yeah,
seat.
it's. The pharmaceutical industry is relatively specialized in what we do, as you know, were discussing earlier, and I think our experience has also been that the regulatory environment in China is challenging. But I would say that in the last several years, the government has shifted their policy. The government's clearly making investments in healthcare, in insurance for healthcare, in, as I said before, infrastructure to support healthcare, as well as in education. And it seems to me that that has enabled companies like ours to have more of an opening to participate in the overall, the segment of the healthcare market that we are in, which, as I said before, is relatively limited as a percent of the total population. So I believe our contribution is viewed as making a contribution to overall health in that population as GDP grows, as you started by reminding us what it has grown to, and people have more discretionary income. Part of that income in developed markets frequently goes to health-related things, and it seems to me, I think to the point you made about pragmatic policy, while I can't speak to specific agreements between companies, the government has enabled a broader access to Western-based pharmaceuticals over the last few years, but not quickly. So just one example from a regulatory perspective, we have been told that every 2 years, the federal government in China will review availability of approved drugs and decide which ones should go on the approved drug list. And if you're not on that list, your opportunity in the country is very small. The last review was finally this past fall in November, but that took almost 4.5 or 5 years with an expectation of 2. So, and one could argue, was that an economic issue? Why didn't it happen sooner? But the fact is, it's an example of where, things run slower there, which it's very difficult to envision how you influence it. So I think there's a health policy related issue probably that we benefit to some degree from, but I spend a fair amount of time in Beijing talking to the pricing people, talking to the FDA, talking to the SFDA, talking to the folks that review our manufacturing and inspection facilities, because we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars now, and I need to be sure we can see clear a way to get that back. But I'm not sure how that relates specifically to Africa.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. We met many times before, both in Davos and in Dalian or Summer Davos.
Summer Davos,
yeah. And the question is very good question. I don't think for the policy there is the difference between the Western investors and African investors. And I think the market, the policy is the same. Market is open to all investors from different parts in the world. As far as I know, in China there is a very successful internet company, QQ, Tencent. And one of the major investors are from South Africa. I don't know if that's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the baker here.
Yeah. So there something is confused. You have the problem for the investment in China. I have a problem in investment in Africa. We tried to invest in Africa, but we failed in that. We negotiated with African operators for many times, but we failed in that. So I think the issue is we need to increase the communication between us and to let us understand each other more. So I think there are many forums, many meetings between Chinese businesses and European and American businesses. We think we can have more exchanges between African businessmen and Chinese businessmen. That's my proposal.
Thank you, Chairman.
充裕了，现在资本的问题呢，基本上不是一个说，就刚刚王董事长讲的，那就看你是不是，不管是来自于 美国的或者欧洲的或者是这个非洲是南非的投资，在今天在中国投资的你资本的这个优势啊，基本不大了。就是大家就中国也很多钱也要找投资的机会找不到，所以实际上就是说你要去中国投资的话，你在技术上、在管理上能不能够带来，这是一个观点。还有，其实中国啊，它是一个很传统的国家，确实是市场经济是在一个发展的过程中，它还在转型。所以这个转型的过程中的这个市场的，你又看它市场有很规范，但是也很不规范的一方面，也有很多人在中国投资失败了的，但是也有很多像坐在这儿很成功的案例。所以呢，就说你去的话，一定要么就跟大公司打交道，跟中国的名牌公司打交道，这样你会吃亏的可能性就会小一些。还有一种呢，你跟跨公司一块进中国去，可能成功更快一些。特别像非洲的这些资金，因为非洲中国不是太了解了，所以我觉得可能就是跟跨公司捆绑一块进去，或者是跟中国的大公司一块捆绑进去也可以。比方我家族还有一个中国大概第4大的一个快递公司，就是做运输的，叫载技术。我这个日本投资者，他在中国投了很多，所有的投的都失败了。但在我这投很成功，大概他在我这儿去年他把股份全卖给我了，大概他的投资回报是50倍，大概只有12年的时间，他赚到50倍的回报回去了。所以投资投得好也是可以的。所以中国确实有很多人进去投资失败，甚至被人家骗了的。中国骗人的也很多，也不是说中国人都是讲信誉的，也有这样的情况。所以我是也补充说这几句。
Thank you, Mr. Chen. That's a very good warning. Well, let's open up. Any questions from our audience? That'll be okay. I go to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name's Professor Ken Morgan from the University of Western Australia. I commend Fortune Time Warner for putting on this conference, and particularly this opening panel of China. If we look at this panel regarding the future of China in 10 years, I want to look at a story yesterday that was in China Daily, and it ran a story on the ant tribe about the colonies of underemployed 1 million students and adding a great deal of many students every year. I mean, if we look at statistics, in 2000 there were just over 1 million graduates. In 2009 there's 6.7 million graduates, and we look at the exponential growth over the next 10 years. But we've got these unemployed youth looking for jobs, earning less than 2,000 yuan per year in Beijing and Shanghai. They're upset, they're angry. My question to Mr. Chan and Mr. Powell, do you see this as a threat to the growth of the economy, political security within China, or do you see this as an issue of positive, an untapped asset that needs to be looked at as developing into the future for the next 10 years? Your comments, gentlemen.
Yeah. I think I did a story on this a couple of years ago. It's an issue, obviously, that the government is acutely concerned about and aware of. It is a big part of the reason why there is such intense pressure to generate 10% growth year in and year out. Now, we're not going to get 10% growth over the next decade on average. I think, however, if the government can successfully downshift, get, say, 8% growth on average over the next 10 years, most of the forecasts that I've seen are that they will be able to create the jobs necessary to sop up some of the, more than some, most of the new labor market entrants. One of the things that's frankly very positive that's happening in China now, even though sometimes in the press it's cast as a negative, is the recent examples of labor unrest that we've seen, all of which, coincidentally or not, at foreign companies, Foxconn, Honda, Toyota, you're seeing strikes at higher profile foreign companies. Now, in Chinese terms, that strikes or labor unrest is not good because it doesn't speak to the harmonious society. But what it says is that workers who have been, who frankly are being paid too little, need to be paid more. And in fact, in each of these cases, you're seeing the companies respond with wage increases. Now that doesn't speak to the issue of the college kids coming out is particularly acute, and it's a very good question because those kids do not want to go work as factory labor in the giant Foxconn plant in the South. They don't want to do that. They want management jobs that puts them on a career path to a solidly middle class or upper middle class lifestyle. The way in which China will diffuse this, or can, and I think should, is, Chairman Wang said earlier, and one of those numbers that just sort of fly by, because the scale of China, sometimes you have a hard time grasping it. 700 million rural citizens in China. 700 million. What has to happen in China, what has to continue is the urbanization of the country. Those rural workers, a vast, seriously high percentage of them, need to be brought in off the farm into urban areas, not just to Beijing and Shanghai anymore, but to Chengdu, to Chongqing, and to the other regional capitals and major cities in central China, in western China, and southwestern China. If that happens, as I believe it probably will, it has to, as you continue to draw those workers off the farm into cities, you drive incomes. Urban workers make more than rural workers, and you create job opportunities for college graduates in all of the provinces. So this process, not only does it have to continue, it needs to accelerate. We're not even midway in the game in terms of the urbanization of China, and that's a key macro point to remember. We're not even halfway down the road of China moving from an agrarian society to an urban society.
Okay. Yeah, 徐总。
我愿意说说这个关于大学生的这个就业困难的问题。我认为大学生就业困难呢，是一个需要重视的问题，但是不会成为我个人认为不会成为今后中国10年发展的问题，反而是我们转变发展方式一个很宝贵的资源。那么历史的往往会这样，就昨天的成绩往往会变成今天的问题。为什么这样说呢？30年前我们大学生太少，所以现在没想到我们30年后呢，现在我们大学生已经太多了。那么这本身我认为就是一个中国教育的这个发展，这个进步。那么现在要解决的问题呢，我觉得是需要政府、企业和大学生3方面共同努力的。那么政府现在已经开始重视大学生的就业问题，采取了种种措施。我也不想具体说。从企业角度来讲呢，像我们上海电气每年大概新进大学生有1000人，那么应该说比例还是比较。这几年尽管遇到金融危机，我们还是按照这样的速度在进。我相信，如果随着中国产业结构的调整，技术能级高的企业越来越多，那需要的大学生呢会越来越多。那么更重要的，我认为大学生本身的就业观念也在实践中呢也会转变，或者需要转变，或者也在转变。因为以前中国也简单的把就业岗位分成白领和蓝领，那么大学毕业生不愿意干蓝领的事情。像我上海电气是做装备制造业的，实际上是需要大量的大学生去做以前概念上认为是蓝领的事情，比如说我们去操作一些 这个很高等级的这个机床啊，或者做一些，或者有些工作他已经说是蓝领和白领之间已经很难简单划分了。那么现在这些岗位上收入都不低的。在我第一线的很多是操作的人，应该说，比刚才那位先生说2000多个武汉至少要翻1倍。但是很多人呢不愿意去干，那么愿意干的人呢都是，工作也是稳定的，收入也是比较好。但现在我看也是越来越多的大学生开始认识到这个问题，愿意做，面对现实愿意去做以前认为是蓝领的岗位，也有不少大学生现在我看去，自己创业。那么也有很多大学生呢，这个现在整个社会，就大学生可以自己创业的机会越来越多。比如中国大家可能知道，那个淘宝网出现以后，实际上会很多的人创造了以前所没有想到的这种就业的岗位。我是这样的观点，就大学生的问题应该引起重视，它应该成为我们今后10年转变发展方式一个很宝贵的资源，关键看我们怎么去用它。谢谢。
Okay, so let's have another question. Yes, the gentleman, you raise your hand very fast. 很多。
Thank you very much. Can you hear? Yeah. First of all, thank you for the panelists for sharing your insightful experience working in China. I am Joseph Fee. I work with a Hong Kong-based group called Li and Feng. I just have a follow-up question to what Mr. Powell was mentioning, the issue on Foxconn and Honda and Toyota. Basically, for people who are probably not familiar with it, in Foxconn there were 10 people who jumped to their deaths, and because of work pressure. And and as a result, I think what happened was that the CEO decided to double the salary, over a series of a number of months. And if you look at what Wen Jiabao was saying, that one of the key objectives of the next 5-year plan is to be able to double the salary of the workers, and it's basically happening in 1 year, for this company, and it's having some spillover effect. The question is. I think probably this is an issue that's wherein the management probably is missing the point. I don't think it's only about the salary. I think it's about the quality of life of the workers. We can no longer ignore the quality of life of the workers in China. So my question is, I'd like to ask the 3 CEOs. And by the way, I feel that Wang Zhong and Chen Zhong talked about a very important point about the practical application of a lot of things. In the past we talked about the practical application of socialism. Right now we're talking about practical application of Confucianism.
So what's your question?
The question is, I'd like to ask, how do you improve what are the measures that you have adopted to improve the quality of life of your workers in your companies? How do you motivate them? How do you train them?
Well, to save time, I just ask Mr. Chen to answer. Yeah.
就2个问题，我把它不完全具体回答。就是实际上大家很关心，就是中国经济很成功，大家都赞成，但中国也很多问题。哪些问题呢？我们中国人很清楚。中国人最大的问题是我们叫经济增长方式。经济增长方式什么概念呢？就是说我们的工业的制造品，我们的耗能，我们的耗原材料，我们是粗放的，是世界上我们跟发达国家比，我们的还是很低的。这样就带来了我们巨大的浪费和巨大的这个环境的污染。中国的污染今天是世界上最厉害的，我们都清楚。所以是讲这是一个概念。第2个概念就是中国的经济地区发展极其不平衡，东部沿海地区和西部不一样，这是中国经济第2个巨大的问题。第3个呢，就是这些年我们只注重经济的发展，我们在社会公共产品。我们在社会的正义和这一个平等和社会的财富再分配的过程中的社会保障体系的建设，我们应该讲不是说不重视，我还是认为中国你先要发展嘛，发展有钱了，你才能够进行财富的重新分配，所以这个问题也是一个问题，就是我想的第3个问题了。第4个问题实际上就刚才讲的，就是中国经济发展呢是处在一个环节口上，刚刚就回答你这个问题，就是说怎么来看这个，像这个刚刚讲的这个汽车事件最著名的，大家知道最大事件就是深圳的那个富士康的这个事件，实际上你看起来好像是一个工人的收入的问题、生存环境的问题，实际上是中国沿海经济转型的问题，就是沿海经济已经走到一个一定完全靠劳动力、完全靠低成本的这个时代过去了。 所以它的经济要转型，要转向更高的层次。所以这个地方就是实际上是反映一个根本的中国经济东部经济要转型的问题。所以我看中国经济存在这些问题，包括刚刚你讲的就业的问题。中国就业的问题也是很有意思的。其实中国现在也在谈论中国什么国进民退，大家都知道，说国有企业比民营企业发展要快。其实这是一个现象，就是由于中国我们有句话叫倒逼机制。什么叫倒逼机制呢？就政府他自己可能觉得这件事情他的观点是落后的，但是市场逼着他去改。为什么呢？他要解决民生问题，就业是最大的一个倒逼机制。什么叫倒逼机制？没有民营企业的发展，没有中小企业的发展，就业是无法解决的。所以要真正我要回答您讲的大学生的问题，要真正解决就业的问题，一定要让中小企业发展，一定要让私营经济、民营经济快速发展。没有中小企业、民营和私营经济的发展，中国的就业问题是解决不了的。所以就逼着政府一定要支持私营企业发展。他可能脑子里觉得私营企业不属于我的，国有企业我好控制，他可能这样想，但是他为了解决社会的就业问题，他必定要放弃，一定要支持私营企业的发展。所以就中国是很有趣的现象。我刚刚把你们两个问题归纳起来讲呢，我认为中国未来10年，过去30年中国经济基本上是个梯形增长，就是工业化、城市化。工业化、城市化的过程是什么呢？就是沿海发展的，然后再向中部、西部转移。未来10年，中国经济会呈现一个新的状态发展。东部沿海，包括北京、上海这些发达的城市，经济是转型，一定要转型。转型要向这个服务业转型，服务业转型，中产阶级会崛起。服务业转型，中国才能够变成一个中产阶级崛起，才有购买力，才有消费力。中国经济才能转向一个内需经济，转向一个就是不是完全像今天世界很不高兴的，就是你们拼命的出口，把别人市场都挤掉了。那么呢，就是东部沿海地区也有3亿人口。如果要转成是个内需消费经济的时候，全世界都会出口到这儿来，会让我们在座的人都到中国去赚钱。所以中国未来20年的话，是东部地区进行产业升级换代。同时，中国的就刚才我们的这个成都的我们的这个，这是实际上是我们的这个也是一个重要官员了啊。就他讲到，未来10年中部和西部呢还会加速城市化、工业化的进程，中国就会变成2个，一个呢就向发达经济转型，一个继续城市化、工业化。这2架引进，我讲2架经济发动的引进，还会持续中国经济未来10年到15年的增长，高增长。现在西方有很多观点说中国会不会出现像日本，说会不会房地产，当然中国现在还有很大问题，房地产的问题今天没有讲，房价的问题、房地产的问题、就业的问题，会不会出现像日本10年的不增长？我说这个他不了解中国经济，绝对不可能的，因为日本的经济它已经是很成熟，所以它的那个泡沫它是2回事。中国的经济未来一定还会10年到15年的增长，15年增长就我刚才讲的东部。就是向服务业转型，中产阶级崛起，中西部还是城市化，这个工业化。所以我就前面讲的就是这个城乡一体化还会10年。所以中国现在的经济发展极其不平衡，城市和乡村的差别会很大。那么这个农村呢，就会巨大的增长的空间。这是我对中国未来的看法，对你们2个的一个综合的一个评价。
Thank you, Mr. Chen. We are running out of time, and I'm very happy that Mr. Chen actually answered part of my questions and also work as a summary. It's great. I know we still have a lot of questions in the audience, but I tell you, we have 2 solutions. One, after this, you can stay a little bit longer and chat with our speakers. Secondly, we have another panel tomorrow called China's New Power. So you're welcome to join that panel too, and we have a further discussion with that. Before we conclude, I would like to invite 5 of the volunteers who are all the way from China. They are the very young people, ranging from 15 to 16 years old to 20 years old. Let them tell us what they believe in 10 years what China will be, okay? Please welcome the young girls and boys. I call the name Yang Yuan. Yang Yuan, come over here. Tell us where you're from, which part of China?
Hi, everyone. Hi everyone, I'm from China, Shenzhen, which is a city next to Hong Kong, and I'm now studying in America, Minnesota. And in 2020, I hope that I can be back to this global forum as a CEO of a company rivaling to American Apple, and I will call it Chinese Mango.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to have a Chinese apple called the China Mango, huh? Okay. So the next one will be Chen Yilun. Mr. Chen, tell us, so you from Beijing?
Yeah, I'm from Beijing.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Yilun Chen, or Jack. I'm currently a student at Harvard University, and in 10 years, I hope that there can be more and more Chinese students studied abroad, working in both in public sectors and private sectors in China, leading China towards more openness, both politically and economically, and I would very much be like to be a part of that group.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's have next one, Miao Qing. So where are you from, Miao Qing? Which part of China?
I'm from Henan. It's in the center of China. I'm now studying in the University of Cambridge in the UK. And I think if 2012 is not the end of the world, I believe in 2020 there will be at least 10 Chinese awarded Nobel Prize. So watch out, Harvard and Cambridge.
Okay, so we have Chinese Nobel Prize. So next one we'll call on Mao Sai. Yeah. Come over.
Hi, my name is Mao Sai, and I'm from Beijing, China. And I believe China's future is determined by my generation, which is so-called the second rich generation, 富二代, or the after 80 generation, 80后. Many of people in my generation has experience of either study abroad or working abroad. So with our knowledge of Western politics and technology, we believe we are a dependent force in China's future development. So all the CEOs on stage, please put trust in us, and we will not disappoint you. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last one, Elise Liu, please come over.
Hi, I'm Elise Liu. I go to high school in Lakeville, Connecticut, and I believe that in 2020, if I come back to South Africa, I'll ask for directions in Chinese.
Wow. Oh, gee. So Elise, you said you in 10 years you come back to Cape Town so you can speak Chinese, that's for directions, right? Wow. Well, our African friends go back to China, they can ask directions in English, right? So, but thank you very much.